these beautiful kimono, and it's a wonderful, inspiring Joe. And currently prior to 531, visit the Emperor of Japan and brought a golden statue of Buddha and also some sutra Shinto, and the emperor was considered a descendant of the sun god. So he was very, very holy. And when Buddhism came, it was a very appealing religion because there was one person to worship, and it had a language that went with it, and it had the written word. And Prince Shotoko, who was alive about that time, was very enamored with all things Korean and Chinese and Buddhism, and he's considered the father of Buddhism in Japan. Sorry, I have to check my notes. And he built the first temples to Buddha. The first one was in Osaka, the second was in Nara, and the third was in Kyoto, which is a very well-known temple for Ikebana. It's the Rikakudo temple in Kyoto. It's the home of the Ikenobo school. To honor Buddha, offerings were made to him, and generally it was 3 items. It would have been the flower with a flower vase, an incense burner, and a candle. And the flowers were very simple. And it would often be just a casual bowl. And this is, I was so happy this morning when I went out and saw that my tree peony was blooming. So they would just put the flower, and it would have been, in India it would have been a lotus flower, but we don't have lotus in Nebraska particularly, so we're just going to offer this simple arrangement to Buddha, to his left hand. And that was the beginning of the marriage between Ikebana and and the Buddhist religion. Now, during the Heian period, the court would move up into the mountains because it would be very hot, and the women during the Heian period very often wore 12 layers of kimono, and they had hair that went down to the floor. So they didn't move very much. So when they moved up to the mountains, because they couldn't move very much, so when they went to the mountains, they would do things that were very calming, like tea ceremony, flower arranging, very simple things. And this is what they would be arranging there. Whoa, lost part of my container. This is a bamboo basket from Japan, and this is a bamboo lacquered container that fits inside of it that holds the water. And I've learned over the years that if you use water in your container, it won't fall over as easily. Little tricks. So during the Heian period, when they would be up in the mountains, they would just go out into the grounds around where they were and find something lovely and just simply put it in a basket. And so it's spring. They probably haven't moved down to Tokyo or moved up from Kyoto yet, but they're on their way. So this would be a very simple arrangement that they would do while they can't move their arms very much. I'll just put something else back here. And it wasn't long before, well, actually it was long, it was centuries, and we had the Muromachi period, and that was a period of great interest in the arts and particularly flower arranging at that time. And the Ikenobo school was active at the time, building these giant, massive rika arrangements for the temples. And if you've ever seen pictures of hotel lobbies in Japan, and they've got these massive arrangements that look like they're on carts, or their vases are 6 feet tall, those are rika arrangements, and they were only done by the priests as offerings to Buddha. So they really progressed from the single flower in the dish. And to simplify it, Sensei Ikenobo was asked to do these rika arrangements, but the people were getting so interested in doing flower arranging that he came up with this theory of Seika style, Shoka style. And what he based this on was, at the time, people were interested in the heavens. It was about the same time that Galileo lived in Europe. Interested in the heavens. They were interested in what man's place was between heaven and earth. So we have heaven, we have man, and we have earth, Shinso and Tai. And then we have the two flowers. So we're working with the element of 5. So they're always 3, 5, or not. 3, 5, 7, or 9, and a shoka arrangement. This is a shoka vase. It's an Ikenobo vase. And my Ikebana friends that do shoka are going to look at this and go, but shoka is not really my style. But I think this is beautiful. This vase has a flat surface, and then it has a hole in it. So the flowers just rest against that opening that's in the inside of the container. It has water in it, or I would tip it over and show it to you. And then we moved on to the Momoyama period. And the other thing to remember, all of this Japanese history, is they were battling one another. There were wars between the factions. There were wars between this clan and that clan. It reminds me very much of middle century English history, where all the nobles were battling each other to be the powerhouse. So during the Momoyama period, there was a lot of battling going on, and it was a very opulent period. It was when they built the Nijo castle in Osaka. So the shoguns were so powerful, and they wanted to protect what they had, and they wanted to show off what they had. So they built these opulent castles with the moats around them, and with the gold plating and the lacquer and just unbelievably gorgeous things. But the warriors were out in the fields, and they weren't really feeling so opulent and lucky at that point. And they needed something to settle them down before battle, settle them down after battle. And they refined the art of tea ceremony. And it became more Zen that time, rather than the opulent tea ceremony of the Heian period and the Muromachi period. And they came up with these tea bowls that were made by this potter named Raku, who's still celebrated in Japan. And he made the tea bowls by hand, without a wheel, and he shaped them using a wooden lathe. And the idea was how they felt in your hand. They had to be beautiful, but how they felt in your hand. And that kind of work we call wabi. It's rustic, it's homey, it's not refined. So that's what the warriors were doing, was tea ceremonies. So when they also came up with the idea of using a stand like this in their tea houses. And the basket that's hanging up there would be what would be chabana. It's a very rustic basket. It's got flowers that were probably picked right out in front of the tea house. And it always hangs on the left side of the tokonoma. And the tokonoma at this time became very popular, and I think if any of you remember houses from the 1950s, right after World War II, they all had this little alcove by the front door. Well, that was brought from Japan. It was the tokonomo. Most every Japanese house has a tokonomo in it as part of their family worship, and they'll have a picture of an ancestor, they'll have a seasonal scroll, they'll have a family flower arrangement in there, and maybe some other decorative things that they're interested in. So, moving on. And then we came to the Edo period, and that was the time that the shogun were really powerful, and they built this beautiful temple and fortress up in Nikko, which is up in the mountains above Tokyo. And it is the shrine that is there was put in by the shoguns, and it's the original hear no, see no, speak no monkeys are from that shrine in Nikko. And flower arranging really exploded at that time among the populace and away from the priests. And they came up with this nageri style arrangement that was similar to the shoka. It was based on 3, 5, 7, or 9. And they call this a casual thrown-in arrangement, but those of us that do this arrangement won't agree with that too much. It's not very casual. And I don't imagine they had these beautiful flowers. This is a variety of protea called Safari Sunset. You may have seen it in the flower shops. But we'll start out with I think that's the so. And here's the shin. See this little twist in there? It wants to twist on me. No, you cut them at an angle so that they rest against the back of the vase. See how it rests against the back of the vase, and that gives you a point of balance for it, so it'll hold like that. Okay, we have our shin, sew, and tie. And I also don't think that they had these beautiful parrot tulips, although that was about the time of the tulip rush in Europe, when the people from Holland were selling tulip bulbs, and people were shorting them just like they do the stock market now. So they well may have had tulips at that time. If anybody else has any questions, please speak up. Now, the beauty of this arrangement is it shows movement. It shows maybe the breeze flowing through the arrangement. It's not a static arrangement like this one is. This is very stiff and static. This one has movement in it. Just going to add one more. Piece back here, just to give it a little more depth. So you're looking at the front, and this is what was going on during the right after the Moriyama period into the Edo period when the shoguns were in power. The branches are cut like this. So this back part where the angle is against the back of the base. And this rests against the support that's in there. There's a support, but there's not a kenzan. The support is an X like this that's in there. No, the problem with those is that it makes everything so stiff. There's no movement. It just makes everything sit where you put it. You should use seasonal flowers and anticipating seasonal flowers. So we should be using summer flowers right now. But you can get any kind of flower any time of the year anymore, so it doesn't really matter too much. Probably shouldn't use holly in the summer. That might not be good. Nah, no poinsettias in the summer. You probably can't even find them. Well, everyone got kind of tired of just having the tall vases, and they wanted something newer. So when the shoguns lost power and the Meiji emperor came back in power, he was very interested in moving flower arranging and everything else away from religion and more into people's lives. And he was very interested in technology, engineering, and reaching out to the world. And about that time, there was this wonderful Japanese man named Mr. Ohara, who invented this clever little device called a shippo. And you could arrange in a low basin, and you could put the flowers in this shippo, and it would hold up. And that was so revolutionary at the time. And then as time progressed, and there's a myth, and I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a myth that at the lead factory, there was a board that had a lot of nails in it, and they spilled the lead over it, and they designed this to be a flower holder. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's kind of a good story. In Japan, this is called a kenzan. I think in the United States, you call it a pin frog. So this is what we use now for these low vase arrangements. And we're sticking with the wabi look, the rustic, plain containers. Now, the Ohara school of Ikebana was very naturalistic, and they loved the mountains, so they made their arrangements to mimic what the view out of the mountains would be to them. And in flower arranging, rather upside down, is that you layer things from the top down. Hi, Kimmy. You layer things from the top down rather than from the bottom up. It's a little counterintuitive. So an arrangement from the Ohara school for this time of year would start probably with lilacs. And this was a very revolutionary style at the beginning of the 19th century. Now, this is not going to be an Ohio arrangement because I'm not with the Ohio school, but it will give you an idea of what he was thinking. I was just in Japan last month, and we went to the museum and the Meiji Jingo Shrine, which is dedicated to the Meiji Emperor. And they showed pictures of the clothes that the Empress wore when she was at court, and she actually wore the 12 layers of kimono for court things. And if you've ever seen the video of it's kind of an old video. It was one of the weddings of the Empress and the Crown Princess and the Crown Prince. And she was wearing 15 layers of kimono, and they had to carry her. She couldn't walk. So we're going to add some pine trees to our mountain scene. Now this is white pine, and it looks kind of bushy, so I'm just going to cut it off. For anyone that wants to do Ikebana, a white pine tree in your yard is mandatory, or 3 of them. Oh gosh, do I have to tell you? Let's see, I have been studying since I was lived in Japan in 1984. And while I was there, this is an Ikebana International event that you're all enjoying this evening. And while I was living in Tokyo, I was international president of Ikebana International. Okay, now we've got our little pine trees in there. The one thing that's different about arranging flowers in the U.S. and arranging flowers in Japan is in Japan they take care of the leaves the same way that they take care of the blossoms. In the United States, they don't seem to care about the leaves. I'm sorry? What caused me to become interested in this? I don't know. I've always been interested in arranging flowers ever since I was a little girl. My mother always thought I'd end up in a florist shop. But I was very fortunate when I put my children. What do you want to do while you're living in Japan? And I said, so I did. Are you feeling like you're in the mountains yet? This is ranuncula, and we're just going to add this down low, just to bring some more color into it. And I just love to combine the pinks and the oranges together. I think it's just so striking and beautiful. You see, we're still working in threes. Everything I'm putting in here forms a triangle. I have this triangle, triangle with the mums, triangle with the pine. And as I said, we're layering, so we're going to add some hosta. If you treat the flowers properly with this combination of flowers, it'll last a good week. Yeah. I'm not treating these flowers very well. They should be cut underwater. And the reason you want to cut them underwater is because when you cut the flower, it kind of goes and sucks up air and gets a blockage in the stem. If you cut it underwater, when it goes, it sucks up water. Okay, how does it look? So this is a landscape style Moribana that was very popular, made popular by the Ohata school, Mr. Ohata, who invented the chippo. Currently, there are hundreds and hundreds of Ikebana schools in Japan, and they were developed all during the Meiji period, and they no longer had to be attached to a shrine. They could just be Ikebana schools for the sake of Ikebana. The school that I belong to is the Ichio school, and it's one of the newer, more contemporary schools. And we've reverted back. We don't use the kenzans anymore. We've reverted back to not using those, so this is a Harry Lauder walking stick that's dried, so it's not flexible for me to bend it. So this might be a little tricky. And we're still carrying on with the wabi look on the container. This container was made by a friend of mine who lives in Asheville, Tennessee, or Asheville, North Carolina. Seems like it should be Tennessee. It's right there, so close. Now I'm going to have to arrange this with you looking at the back. I apologize for that. And again, for this kind of an arrangement, the way you cut is very important because it has to fit in here somewhere. It'll fit. You know, this is one of those arrangements that you can practice and practice at home, and when you get out to do it where it's important, it doesn't work. But we'll just keep plugging away at it. It'll come together. We're still going in threes, as you can see. Have you all looked around at the arrangements in the room? I'm sure you have. I think it's so interesting. We've got primarily Koryu School, which is a classical school similar to Ikenobo, and then we have the Ichio School, which is my school that's the more contemporary style. And it's just fascinating to me how beautiful all the arrangements are, even though they're all so different. You get the same kind of material. Now I'm combining the orange and the pink again because I just love it. There we go. This is a very contemporary Ichio style arrangement. So are there any questions? Anything else you want to know? Well, the Japanese always have had the tokonomo that they display in, but a buffet, so you've got a wall behind it, or a hall table is a good place to put it. If you have a table that, like a coffee table or a dining room table, you need to be able to see, the arrangement needs to look beautiful from all four directions. Well, thank you all for coming.